So now I want to try to think about what that approach, which I hope is a loving approach, might say to one of the most culturally charged challenges of our culture, of transgenderism. So here is the sort of statement that, in the context of what I do, I receive pretty frequently. Somebody might say something along these lines. I was born biologically male, but I feel I'm in a body I should not be in. I know I'm a woman, and I want to undergo gender reassignment surgery so that I can have a new body that reflects who I really am. What does Christianity have to say to someone like me? Now, as we spoke about in the first half, first and foremost, I want to listen really well to what someone's saying. I want to ask some connected questions so that I really understand as much as I can the experience, the painful experience that this person may be going through. I don't want to start just speaking like I know what's going on in their life. But I want to think about this through an approach of looking at the person and being like, there's good in front of me and there's truth in front of me. Let me have this charitable approach where I find the positives and I'm building a bridge, even as I hold to what I believe to be biblical truth. And we'll get to that. So Romans 1 and Genesis 1. Now, sadly, I feel like when this sort of statement is made to many Christians, we have no idea how to begin to process it and think about it. And for some Christians, the instinct can be to sort of just get defensive and to kind of do the opposite of what I'm saying and just sort of just say, okay, why do I disagree with that? I know I'm supposed to disagree with that. What are my objections? Oh, okay. Actually, first, let's ask questions, let's love, let's listen well, and then let's remind ourselves, Genesis 1, Romans 1. As a Christian, is there any remnant of good in what this person is communicating? As a Christian, is there any remnant of truth in what this person is communicating? Maybe let me put that question to you guys. Can anybody in what this person is saying see a remnant of good or truth, regardless of whether you actually agree with the statement? But do you see a remnant of good or truth that could be a starting point for how you begin to process this? Yes, Phoebe.
I was born biologically male. That is the truth.
Yes. So right at the beginning is something that you agree with. But it'd be so easy, and so often it happens, for us to just completely skip past. I mean, it's even at the beginning. You would think that would be our starting point. But we sometimes have this tendency, how can I focus in? I got to focus in on what I disagree with. Oh, no, somebody disagrees with me. I got to correct them as fast as possible. How do I figure out what? So I like that. Look, the very beginning of the paragraph is something that you could see as a remnant of agreement. Maybe a couple more?
People need desire to have the truth themselves and be found who are really.
Yes, I love that. And that might even be where I start in the conversation. If I was in this conversation, that might be where I start. I really appreciate this desire. It's interesting, actually, that you have a deep desire to be really who you are. That's an interesting concept. I mean, in fact, embedded in that concept is kind of this idea that we are more than just our physical makeup. That's an interesting concept from a spiritual perspective. So yes, I think that's a wonderful thing to actually identify, hey, there may be a remnant of good and truth in that desire that you have to be really who you are. Let's talk about what that could mean. Samuel?
I guess there's an understandable feeling of how, like, their identity as a person, like, they don't know how to identify, not like specifically in a gender, but specifically just in their society, in like the society or like their family dynamic. Like, how do they identify?
Yes, that's great too. And so I love that. So like, and here is where we need to have wisdom. On the one hand, not just saying, I know how you feel, right? We need to be careful to not be trite in that way. But at the same time, like, there is this fundamental sense within the Christian faith and the Christian understanding of the world that all of us are wrestling with, struggling with. What does it mean to live in a broken world? And what is my identity in a broken world, this deep sense that things as a whole are not the way they're supposed to be. I was made for something else. Who am I really? So there's a lot of deep themes below the surface here that we can actually connect with. I think that 2 Corinthians 5, the first 5 verses of it, to me at least, are a remarkable passage to read through the lens of what it might have to say. And again, this might be a long conversation. This might take months or years. But what it might have to say and how it might help us to process the question of gender dysphoria. So let's read this together. And remember here that Paul is speaking, when we speak about the earthly tent, he's speaking about our physical bodies. So here we go. For we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. Meanwhile, we groan, longing to be clothed instead with our heavenly dwelling. For while we are in this tent, we groan and are burdened, because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed instead with our heavenly dwelling, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. Now, the one who has fashioned us for this very purpose is God, who has given us the Spirit as a deposit, guaranteeing what is to come. Wonderful, thank you. So as I read this passage, is there any sense as a Christian that I can relate to someone who is not fully satisfied currently with their body? We groan. We groan and are burdened. You know, I'm only into my 40s at the moment, and I've got a bad back, and it aches every night when I lie down, you know? Is there anybody here who is hoping that their body is going to be just the way it is right now for the rest of eternity? You know, I asked that to a group of 18-year-olds at YWAM, and people were like, okay, wait a few years. But, you know, in general, no, right? Is there any sense as a Christian in which I can relate to someone who is hoping that one day their body will be different in certain respects? Yes, I can relate to that, because I'm certainly not hoping to be in this corruptible body for all of eternity. I'm hoping for a redeemed body that this passage speaks about that ultimately won't be corruptible and won't know death or mourning or crying or pain. Is there any sense as a Christian in which I can relate both to the burden of being in our current bodies and to the desire for a new body? And yet, then the promise of God in this passage, not built by human hands. So, Genesis 1, Romans 1, the remnant of good, the remnant of truth. Yes, we're in this broken world. Yes, that is related to our bodies too. Yes, we groan, we're burdened. Yes, we were made for more, a body that truly reflects who we are. That's where we're headed. That's the eternal redeemed body that we are intended to have. And yet, then the promise of God, not built by human hands, which I find to be a relief, like not something that I need to try to resolve. I don't need to try to resolve that tension myself, sort of just hoping that whatever way I try to resolve it might work, might actually resolve the tension. That's a serious burden to carry. Instead, it says, no, the one who has fashioned us for this very purpose, for this new body that awaits eternally, is God, who has given us his Spirit as a deposit, guaranteeing what is to come. So I don't have to try to take matters into my own hands to see if I can somehow resolve this on my own. No, that's actually not my role, according to the Scriptures. That's God's role. The blessing in that is it's not something that I just sort of like attempt and kind of hope in an uncertain way for. It's something that God will do in his timing, in the right way, and he will give us a guarantee of that by his Holy Spirit that comes within us. So I find it quite remarkable that, people say, what can a several thousand-year-old ancient text have to say to the cultural challenges of today? Right? Surely that's out of date. But to me, I go to a passage like this and I think, boy, that speaks so direct. Is that a full answer to every question having to do with transgenderism? No, of course not. But as a starting point, in terms of how we can understand it within the context of the Christian narrative, right? How we can appreciate and empathize with what someone might be going through and respond in a way that's loving, but also a way that is anchored in biblical truth. I think it's quite amazing that there's a passage like this from thousands of years ago that speaks so directly to the questions of today. And then this is a point that Sam Alberry makes, one more point of deep connection. Is there any sense in which Jesus can relate to this person's experience? Is there any sense in which Jesus can relate to the experience of, for a time, being in a body that does not fully reflect who one is? Well, yes, of course, because Jesus is the infinite, incorruptible God of the universe, the second person of the Trinity, who voluntarily, willfully, for a time, was willing to live in a finite, corruptible human body that could die. So that's a deep point of connection with this person as well. And so I believe that God created male and female. I believe that the way feeling tensions within our gender are resolved is not by us trying to resolve that ourselves, but that's something that God will do in his time. But the groaning that we experience, the burden that we experience is acknowledged and is real. And when it is time for God to do that in his way, it's something that we can have confidence in, that we will have a body that will fully reflect who we are, and it will be guaranteed, not something that we just hope for in an uncertain way.